Hey, what's up? This is Wilson with Abysmal Hymns, and I got Reza Mills back with me. And as promised, we're going to do our top five first wave of black metal or proto black metal, if you want to call it that, albums. And I was thinking about it too. There's so typically the mm, first wave is defined as being 1981 to 1991. And I have two albums I think that crossed that threshold a little bit. But the thing about it is some of these bands at the time, like they're names that we know now, but in like 1991 and 1992, no one ever heard of these bands before. So that's something I think we kind of take for granted about the origins of black metal as it was a little more amorphous. Even when things happened, as far as like the church burnings got covered in Kerrang and all that, that was still pretty underground, even if you lived in Europe. That did not bleed over into mainstream metal culture till the 2000s, I would say. Some of those bands started kind of gaining some ground, you know, um, in certain metal communities, but really black metal was underground until, the past 2 decades, I would say. It really came in more to the forefront and has pretty much influenced every metal genre now. And how I define black metal is its primary objective is to create sonic darkness. And it obviously descended from punk to some extent and some traditional metal like thrash. So, yep, there we go. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, but not too dissimilar, really. I see sort of black metal, well, especially this wave. What I love about it is it's kind of basically everything that run-of-the-mill metal isn't. It's very, very raw. It's not really that focused on technicality, even though there were some pretty good players around. One of which especially I'm going to be mentioning during the course of this program. And yes, it was certainly influenced by punk, although thrash always had its kind of roots in the new album sort of technicality and, melodicism, which maybe, as great as this stuff is that we're going to be discussing, we're not talking about catchy choruses necessarily, it's very much raw, dirty, um, not really for mainstream public consumption, and it's certainly influenced by not just punk but crust punk. So bands like Amoebics, maybe stuff like Discharge, those sort of bands, maybe Rudimentary Penny, and that's what I love about it. It just has that rawness, that punch in the face that I feel that sometimes metal lacks. Which sounds like a bit of a generalization, but for my personal taste, I'm not really into the overly technical stuff. I like the more punky stuff, which um, the first wave certainly had. And you're right, it didn't really get that much traction until much later on with some of the Norwegian bands that were coming out that really name checked a lot of these. And I have to give a shout out to Fenriz of Dark Throne because he got me into a bunch of these bands I'd otherwise never have heard of. So yeah,
Even
that's
Dark
basically it.
Throne, I remember even
Yeah,
Dark Throne, you would see their name in the back of metal magazines, but you would never, I mean, I knew the name, but did not actually hear them until sometime in the late 90s.
yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, their first album was a death metal album as well, from what I
Right.
remember. And it was okay. It's fine. It's good for what it is. But for me, my interest was piqued much later with, some of their later stuff. And they did cross punk albums as well, with two varied success. They're okay. They're not brilliant, but I appreciated the sentiment, certainly. So, yeah, really, really cool guy and fantastic band. And it's really thanks to them that I even heard of half of this.
Right, right. I mean, I
Yeah.
like their punk albums more than when they're trying to sound like Iron Maiden, Dark
Well,
Throne.
yeah, is that particularly that album? What was it called? Viking something. I
Oh yeah.
can't.
I like Cult is alive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fun. Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Well, cool. Start us off.
Okay, man. So we kind of touched very briefly on the later scene, the later black metal scene, and I'm gonna discuss now an album called Death Crush. Well, it's not really an album; it's an EP by, of course, Mayhem. And I chose this one because it kind of fits into that timeline that you brought up at the very start, between 81 and 91 or thereabouts. And, Mayhem are one of those weird bands, like the latest stuff I can't be bothered with. No, it's not really my thing. But this, and of course, the big debut album that came later on, are the ones that really do it for me. This one in particular, I mean, it's an interesting little EP. It features the first track, Sylvester Anfrang, was by Konrad Schnitzler of Cluster, who, contributed to that. And it's, what is it, 7 tracks? I mean, there's a song on here, for God's sake, called Pure Fucking Armageddon. That doesn't sound punk to you. I don't know what does. I mean, Chainsaw Guts, fuck. I mean, titles aside, and hilariously so, I just think it's such a great little record. If you're into the more polished stuff and you like that side of black metal, you might not be into this EP, but for someone who likes the crustier, dirtier sound, it's certainly up my street. And there's a Venom cover as well.
All right, there you go. So Mayhem, the Death Crush EP. I mean, I like it for sure.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where I agree it kind of fits into here because I'll have my first album's one that kind of crosses over too. Like,
Hmm.
there was not like a clear delineation with a lot of this stuff when it came out. They were just making music.
Sure.
Nobody really, I remember in high school thinking that black metal just meant that it was like you had to like seriously worship the devil. Um, and I mean, I think that I succeeded in all five of my picks here. Because I wanted, like, I remember being so disappointed when Slayer came out in this interview with the Rolling Stone magazine and said that it was all like a marketing scheme.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that was like Kiss taking off the makeup, it was
Well,
just
it's like, Tom Araya. He's like the sweetest guy you can imagine. Like, this avuncular sort of uncle guy, good, like, Catholic. He's quite religious. So it's like, okay, well, that's kind of not what you expect.
right.
You know.
Which I guess will bring me to my number one pick of
Okay.
somebody that is not a sellout like that and actually went to prison for murder and
Ah.
decided
Mm.
that he had to kill himself in order to become a Black Dragon of Chaos. So I'm going to go with the 1993 album by Dissection, The Somberlin.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
While I like the album that came after this more from a songwriting perspective, this album is still, if I had to say, well, what are my five favorite albums from this time period, would be the Somberlin because you can hear, even though it crosses that 91 threshold,
Mm.
it hasn't gone into the sound that we think of as like second wave black metal, because there's not a lot of tremolo picking, it's not all blast beats, it's not
Yeah.
all screeched vocals.
Mm.
Um, it kind of, I mean, they were, and I think that these guys were like ahead of their time and influenced like a lot of black metal bands that came out after, particularly
Sure.
anybody from Sweden. It had more like harmony guitar. So it's kind of not quite the antithesis of something like Mayhem, but it was definitely more polished. You could hear
But really
guitar
well
harmonies.
done.
Yeah.
Really well done. I mean, I haven't listened to them for a long time, but I do remember being very impressed. I don't know which is the album with the guy on a horse or something.
That one
Second,
is you're probably thinking of it's right there in my iTunes, if I can not blank on it. You're thinking of Storm of the Lights band.
that's the one. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Storm of the Lights band does cross over for me. Like if you're gonna say, well, and I think this is possible with like a lot of bands that we've talked about
Hmm.
over the course of the past few months, is you can cross genres just because you make one album that's let's say shoegaze. That doesn't mean that your next album is not going to be black metal. You know,
Sure. Absolutely.
um, I think that if it's happening organically, so they're the first album is more of what I would call first wave of black metal. The second album, then they picked up the tempo. They're
Mm,
angrier. He's not shriek. He never shrieks really.
no.
But it has a very like more of a coldness to it. And I think that's one of the keystones of black metal is it does have that kind of the way the chords have like a cool dissonance to them creates the atmosphere. And I think that's what gives black metal the edge over death metal as far as like what I like to listen to because it's
Yeah.
more atmospheric and there's more room to incorporate different types of emotion rather than death metal, which is just aggression, aggression, aggression.
Yeah, and I think that's probably part of the reason why I slightly prefer it. I mean, I don't like all of black metal. There's certain couple of bands like Cradle of Filth, which I think take it way too far.
Right.
Which my
And
cup of tea.
and Cradle of Filth is a good example where I think maybe they started off as black metal, but now they're basically symphonic metal, you know.
Yeah, and something else.
I mean,
Yeah.
just throw in a girl and it'd be Nightwish.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's basically bad hammer horror to mute.
Replace the shrieking with some type of Tarja Turner operatic
Oh God.
crap, and there
Uh,
you
hey ho. Anyway.
go.
All right. So my next choice, I think my selections are going to be a bit more predictable, I'm afraid. Sorry, people, but my next one, I think this guy is an certifiable genius. It's Tom Warrior, but the album is Two Megatherion by, of course, Celtic Frost. Um, yeah, such an interesting performer, has really evolved from his roots. This record in particular, I mean, Morbid Tales is fantastic, but I feel like with this record, the band really came into their own. I mean, it's like Wagner put to metal, basically. It's really bombastic, very apocalyptic. The Geiger artwork as well is formidable. I'd love to get a print of that one day. And I mean, Tu Megatherion is Greek for the great beast. So, I mean, what's not more black metal than that? And I mean, I remember like so many questions like The Usurper. Check out High on Fire's cover of that. It's really good. Circle of the Tyrants, of course, is incredible. And I love that weird thing that he does with his vocals, that huh, sort of weird grunt thing that he does. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, weird death grunt. It's very distinctive as well. I think this guy is probably out of all the metal bands in the world, even more than Sabbath. I would say Gabriel Fisher, Tom Warrior, whatever you want to call him. I would say he's probably my favorite performer in metal outright because there's just an intelligence there. He's not afraid to dabble into other genres while still maintaining the heaviness and the apocalyptic feel. So yeah, for me, Two Megatherion is probably one of my standout records from the 80s as far as metal is concerned.
So that is actually on my list too.
Hey,
There's
snap.
my number two. We'll call that my number two as well. And the reason I think you kind of touched on it
Mm,
is they experiment more than they did on the first album.
yeah, yeah,
The first album was almost more thrash, and I remember when this came out, they would get lumped in with like thrash bands.
yeah.
Um, Even though they weren't necessarily always playing fast. Like my favorite songs by them remind me more of like Obituary, how Obituary kind of like does that really grinding, slow,
Mm.
angular rhythm.
Sure,
Um, and I was reading where Tom Moyer was talking about that, that probably Discharge was just as influential to him as Venom
sure.
or
Yeah,
Black Sabbath, and you can hear that, even though there's also they have a hand in other music influencing them. Like I'm sure he probably owned the first Swans album. I'm sure he
yeah,
probably liked Killing Joke, because there is a and that kind of
Mm.
creeped into the other albums that came after this, like a very like almost gothy type feel. And for me, they were like darker than other bands that were coming out. So
Absolutely.
that
And
won me
it's
over.
interesting you said about other music, and you brought in a couple of really good examples there. The late, great Martin Ain, God rest his soul, he actually said in an interview that he said, we loved metal, we loved punk, we loved all of that. But he said there are many different shades of darkness out there. So he brought up Sisters of Mercy, brought out the first Banshees record. So I'm sure. Someone like Dead Can Dance came in there as well. I could be wrong. So
Right.
yeah,
No,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right. That's what I love about them so much is their ability to incorporate all of these influences, but without being so generic, but being totally original. I mean, I would struggle to really compare Celtic Frost if I was writing a view of their music. I could sort of touch on, yeah, there's a bit of discharge, but it's not obvious.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. Which makes it a nightmare to review, potentially, but also a
Well, they
pleasure.
set themselves apart. I mean, there's like,
Yeah.
I think on this, on like two, three songs on this album, there's like a French horn,
Yes.
and then there's female vocals,
Yeah.
and like a lot of like crazy sound effects. So I think with like the female vocals is where you can think of Dead Can Dance.
Mm,
Um,
absolutely.
and it was kind of prime the pump for me to expand my musical horizons and say, okay, well now I like that the fact that this is dark and heavy without being just heavy metal.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little bit more going on upstairs, really. Like for me, like Voivod are when it comes to thrash.
Right, right.
It's fast, it can be brutal, it doesn't sacrifice any of that. But at the same time, you're not just like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. Just another band who sounds like this. It's like, oh, okay, thrash band singing about space, right? Okay, fine, bit proggy. So yeah, that's the exact same reason I love Celtic Frost. There's just a little bit more going on.
And it's funny because most of my friends that listen to Celtic Frost also liked Voivod and Venom, so that
Common theme, absolutely.
was definitely in the same kind of musical sphere.
Yeah.
And another thing I guess that bears mentioning, as
Mm,
opposed to the other four albums on my list,
mm,
is that you brought up the Tube Megatherion, which
mm.
was Aleister Crowley's nickname.
Oh, okay.
And this album is about the occult rather than being just about Satan. So, and I think that kind of there's a
Yeah.
difference in that kind of made me as a kid being into those types of things. I was like, oh, okay, so let me dig into this because I was always big on digging into where like the ideas and the influences came from.
Mm.
So sometimes that played against me, when I started dropping acid because of Black Sabbath. But, no, well.
Well, you live and learn, all that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
All right, what you got next?
Okay, man. So I've got a couple of Brazilian bands lined up. One, of course, is incredibly obvious, but the first one is a band called, now I'm sure I'm pronouncing this okay, Sarcophago.
Hmm.
Uh, and oh dear, I remember first listening to this first record of theirs, and it's the debut album, INRI. And if you're not into brilliant production, then it's tailor-made for you. I'm fairly sure. I mean, there is an actual drummer, but it sounds like there's a drum machine in there. The production is really, really dodgy, very, very ropey, but it just has this breakneck style. And actually, I'm just reading a description of the album because I don't really know too much about them other than the fact that I really enjoyed it. So, of course, I take Celtic Frost, Bathory, and Slayer, as well as Finnish hardcore bands such as Tarvit Kadat and Ratus. Really good, by the way, if you want to check them out. And just so, in essence, they were a crossover band. And they had the corpse paint as well. And I think next to Slayer, possibly, were one of the first bands alongside also Celtic Frost to incorporate that look. They almost look dead if you looked at any pictures of them. Of course, at the time, I'm guessing it would have been terrifying. You just look back now and just laugh because it looks so silly. But definitely an underrated little band, probably because the other band I'll be mentioning when it's my go again have gotten a lot of the attention and for good reason. But yeah, I would say it's worth checking these guys out. Just don't go in there with crazy expectations that it's going to be as good as that other band, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. And if you just want, you know, kick ass, brutal, early black metal, death metal crossover, then I think these guys are going to be for you.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess who I first heard them from was my friend Eric. He plays in Watain. He's super into those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I remember him playing them, and I was like, well, this is just freaking chaos. It reminded me of Jism,
Yes. Yes.
to some extent. And aside from, friends like him that are into, which tend to be, guys that are into black metal, but also punk,
Mm,
um, I don't own any of their albums, but I appreciate what
oh,
they do. So,
sure.
yeah.
Interestingly, they were on the Cogmuelo label, which a certain band I'm going to be mentioning next were featured on, as well as a bunch of other bands like Holocausto, who are also a lot of fun. Brazil, man, got some great metal and hardcore there.
Yeah. And they do down in Chile too. Chile's
Yeah, I've heard. There's
super
a
into
band
metal.
called Pentagram, isn't there? To not be
Yeah.
confused with the Doom band of the
Right,
same name.
right.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Okay, well, you talked about how probably one of your favorite metal entities or performers was Tom Warrior. So I guess we're gonna have to get into my favorite metal entity. Um, I guess it could, this guy is, I'd say with Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden are my other two big ones, but this album's from 1984, and I always consider it the first black metal album, but just because it's so seriously dark and there's a lot of ritualistic elements to it, but it's very like immaculately produced, and all the guitars sound just airtight. And you either like these guys, or you don't like them. It's Merciful Fate's "Don't Break the Oath."
Yeah.
Which when I heard this, it was just so like darker than any metal band that I had heard before. Which I originally heard King Diamond, so I remember I bought the picture disc for, or maybe it was a cassette of No Presents for Christmas. Like that was the first thing I ever bought by King Diamond. That was the only
It's
thing I
fun.
could find.
It's fun.
And so I bought that, and then it had Shine, which was the lead single for Fatal Portrait. So then I got Fatal Portrait when that came out, and then I bought this album. And there was like a huge, I was like, this is so much heavier than what he was doing. But
Hmm.
I mean, I love King Diamond solo stuff, but I think this is just the best thing he's done is Don't Break
But
the
but don't I don't know if you've seen the Beavis and Butthead take on King Diamond.
No.
Yeah, go and look it up. I mean, they're not fans, but as do they. They always ripped stuff in a very amusing way. But I was just reminded of that. I'll send you the link after.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, King Diamond is definitely an acquired taste. Either you get into what he does or you don't. But until he like went off on this like horror movie thing with his solo stuff, which I
Hmm.
like pretty well for the most part. I mean,
Fun. It's fun at the end
yeah.
of the, you know.
Um, I always took Merciful Fate more seriously. And I mean,
I'll tell you what, you're absolutely right. I actually quite like Merciful Fate. I mean the original, early years, and there's some excellent playing. I mean, I think, wow. I know the EP. Is it what's it called? Is it Corpse Without a Soul or is it Nuns Have No Fun?
Melissa, is that it?
Yeah, that
About
might be it.
Melissa?
Oh, yeah, yeah, Melissa as well. Yeah.
Because
But
Melissa's EP, then they had the one that was like, I had it as a tape called In the Beginning. And that
yes,
was like it had Nuns Having Fun on it.
that's it. Yeah.
Yep. It
Oh,
got
okay.
reissued
Yeah.
a lot.
I was just looking at the discography. Yeah, that must have been a track rather than an EP. Yeah. Okay, I've got you. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I really like Merciful Fate. I mean, King Diamond is a hard sell because it is one of those love it or hate it voices. I can actually, within the context of Merciful Fate, it's almost so ridiculously overboard that it kind of doesn't really bother me too much, funnily enough, despite not usually being a fan of that vocal style, because the music is so good and it kind of I couldn't really imagine, say, John Bush that singing
Right. Yeah.
stuff. It just wouldn't work. Whereas, yeah, I think,
Like
yeah.
it sounds horrible when Metallica covers Merciful Fate songs.
Oh yeah, Garage. What was it called? Garage Days Revisited or
Yeah,
whatever that.
like Curse of the Pharaohs. That was terrible.
Yeah, it was a bit. Yeah, it was a bit.
Curse of the Pharaohs can be so deadly. Yeah.
It was a bit meat and potatoes. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
All
Good choice.
right, here we go. What do you
Okay,
get?
man. So yeah, I mentioned the other band from Brazil, and again, doesn't really need too much introduction. It's Sepultura, but I'll caveat it by saying it's actually two releases, because I actually bought it, one of those Roadrunner, two things on one CD. So it's the Bestial Devastation slash Morbid Visions era. Um, you know. They didn't really do this style for very long. We're talking about maybe a couple of years. And before, obviously, Andreas Kisser came in, and then they went off and did whatever they did. Became a, well, you could say improved a hell of a lot. But I just have such a soft spot for what they did early on. It was very much in the, influenced by what was going on around them. I mean, considering it was 1986, so they were just in their mid-teens. I think even Igor was like 16 or something. So it's hugely impressive. I just love that rawness to it. I'm not sure if I mean, I've heard the re-recording of it and it's fine for what it is, but I think it like misses the point a little bit that it had a certain sound. Gyro Guades or Gyro T, whatever he's called, also had a big part to play in the band. So yeah, definitely influenced by what was going on around them. Um, Probably not as loved as some of their later releases, but I would say if you're a gigantic Sepultura fan, anyone listening, just ignore the production value. If you can get past that, you're going to really dig this because I think it rocks as much as Schizophrenia or Beneath the Remains or any of that stuff. So yeah, it's Morbid Vision slash Bestial Devastation for me.
So I had Morbid Visions as a tape. I didn't have Bestial Devastation,
Yeah.
um, but I heard it,
Hmm.
and I mean, I always go back to Sepultura. They're pretty solid, and it goes into one of those things where they had a broader range of influence. Like
Cool.
when you said Amoebex, well, that makes sense because that would be who's certainly an influence on those guys.
Hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the artwork is absolutely terrible. Really, really bad artwork. But and again, it probably suits the the production values, but it has charm of its own, It definitely has a charm.
For sure. I guess an album I kind of see kind of like that will be my next pick. It's a
Okay.
band from Switzerland from
Hmm.
1991. It's Samael's Worship Him
Okay.
album. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, this captures a lot of that type of thing. It kind of falls in that space between death metal and what we think of as black metal today. But it was just very like dark and raw, and they seemed pretty sincere about what they were doing. And I mean, they later, evolved beyond that style. Like Sepultura, became like almost as polished as like Opeth before they sold out. But yeah, um, I don't know. It just stuck with me and it made an impression, and I like that album.
Yeah, I don't know really much about it. I've heard the name, but is there a, do you think it would be up my street necessarily or
You could, yeah, I think you would appreciate the first album for
yeah?
sure. You might even like some of the later stuff because it gets into industrial.
Oh, cool. Well,
Um,
I've got a bit of that.
but yeah, definitely check out Worship Him.
Worship him. Okay, yeah, very good. All right, I'll add that to the old play.
Super, super satanic, so make sure that you eat something spicy to get some indigestion while you.
Fair enough.
All right, what you got?
Right. So, well, my fifth choice, if you were, again, I'm going to evoke the great Tom Warrior, and it's probably no great surprise what I'm going to be choosing. It is Hellhammer. And funnily enough, I think I'm sure recently he actually went out on tour as
Hmm.
Hellhammer, if I remember correctly. I think it, I think that it's kind of a complicated band for him because let's be brutally honest, although I like them, probably not a patch on what he would do later. And in fact, they were kind of a bit of albatross around his neck for the longest time because he was ridiculed a lot because just they were kids. They were just it was a bit sloppy,
Hmm.
but the influence on the black metal genre as a whole can't be denied. I mean, I'm pretty sure is it Mayhem's drummer was he called Hellhammer, so
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's where he got his name. And again, it's just that crossover vibe, Motorhead, Sabbath with punk in there. Oh, I should probably say the record, that would help. It's Apocalyptic Raids, which I think was their only proper EP release or
Hmm.
album release, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, probably the least essential necessarily of his works. I mean, to go on to do much, much better with Frost and then Apollon Sun and then Triptychon. But an important band, not just in terms of giving him a starting point, but also the one of the foundations of what black metal would become. In fact, the whole darkness and the grisliness of that whole genre. I can't remember which release it was. I'm sure it was someone who had unalived himself, like hung himself. I can't remember which release it is. So all those themes come into it too. And I think I read his autobiography and I think he had quite a lot of childhood trauma. So that definitely seems to play a part in some of the music here.
Hey, it makes crucifix dildos now, you know. Ever see that line?
Yes, quite. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, Hellhammer is one of those bands where I appreciate the part that they played that got us to Celtic Frost. You know, if you ask me who I'm going to listen to, I'm going to listen to Celtic Frost
Of course, yes. Yeah.
before those guys or Triptychon or whatever. Even though,
Sure.
Triptychon kind of gets into my typo negative type wheelhouse, but I haven't listened to them enough. I know they have a new album coming out at some point, so we'll see.
Mm. Mm. Sure. Absolutely. Oh, and don't forget Apollon Sun as well. I don't know if you ever
Right, yeah.
and they were good. He's just one of those guys that just seem to evolve over time. And I don't want people to go away thinking that Hellhammer is like, you know, if you don't listen to it, that you're gonna be profoundly disappointed. But if you're a fan of his, like I am, I'm one of those really boring people that if I like an artist, I'll pretty much check out everything they've ever done, ever. And that's hard work when it comes to like the Melvins, for
See,
example.
now with like the fringe of Tom Warrior albums that I look like, rather than Hellhammer, it's probably Cold Lake.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah,
So.
that's a big test. To be fair, there are some good tunes on it.
Yeah,
The
Cherry
image didn't.
Orchard is okay.
Cool.
So my final pick, totally obscure, um, but a great album from when it came out. And in fact, I could not find it in record stores. I had to order it from the back of a metal magazine. I think it was Metal Maniacs.
Hmm.
It's from 1992. It's Rites of the Black Mass by Asheron.
Right.
They were more of a death metal band, but they were darker than even like Deicide.
Okay.
and we're super serious about everything. I remember when I ordered it, I got a t-shirt and a little membership card into the Church of the Order of Nine Angles, I think, was their little satanic organization,
Okay.
which is still a thing apparently. And it's like if you go YouTube that, there's a whole, you'll probably get put on like the TSA um watchdog list for terrorism or something because they've turned into like a terrorist organization or something. I
Oh,
probably can't even talk about it on YouTube, but oh well.
wow.
So yeah. Anyway, it's super serious about the Satan, and that's really all it took to win me over as a teenager was to after my
Sure.
bitterness with Slayer was to be super serious about what you were doing.
I actually wanted, yeah, to make a point about that. It is interesting with a lot of these bands, and the whole thing, the whole satanic panic drivel that seemed to go on for quite a few years. At the end of the day, I think a lot of these bands, with maybe the exception of the one you've just mentioned, turn towards a Satan thing and all of this. It's rebellion at the end of the day. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just, you know, people living in really very, very conservative backgrounds. Like, we want to do a big FU to, authority. And I remember reading Ian Christ's book on metal, and he said, do does the anarchy symbol and the pentagram symbol really look that different from each other? And that's all it is. It's like the metal version of the whole anarchy symbol. It's just a rebellion, really. So people who take it way too seriously and start thinking it's some kind of like,
I mean, I
opening the
guess even
hell.
people that are taking it seriously could take the
Yeah.
rebellion part as like the
Yeah.
biblical rebellion of Satan rebelling against
Yeah.
God.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, we're all young, angry at one point, and it kind of plays a part there. I think sometimes people take things a little bit too literally, maybe, but it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, anyone who's scared of it is a bit stupid, really, because
right,
it's
right.
it's like it's like Alice Cooper once said, that you know he loved meeting the black metal guys who were all trying to look as evil as each other. And then they'd be talking to him and going, "Oh, Mr. Cooper, I'm a big fan. Come and meet my mother." He said, "I thought you guys were into Satan." He said, "It's very rare that you meet someone truly scary in that sense."
Right. I
So,
mean, I got a couple truly, well, I'd say John from Dissection's probably the scariest of the bunch. King Diamond's a pretty nice guy.
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, I'm sure there's the odd person, of course, but for the majority of them, they all seem fairly sound. Although I don't like Cradle of Filth, Uh, the
I look for
guys
different reasons to that.
probably all right. I don't know. I don't know them, but I've got no idea. But they're not sitting there, worshipping Satan necessarily. It's a gimmick of sorts, and
I
whatever.
kind of default on what they said in what was the movie Dazed and Confused when Matthew McConaughey said, "Well, it would be a lot cooler if you did."
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. Yeah. Cool.
All right. I will. We're about to get zoomed out, but I will catch up with you in a minute. And for you guys, thanks for watching. We'll be back with some yet to determine.